Hello and welcome back. Welcome to week 3 of Vulnerable Visibility 101 Live. And this is week 3, Building Strength. I just want to welcome you all in and thank you again for saying yes to yourself and your people by showing up for this 8-week journey. And I'm just so thrilled to get to be with you today. As you know, I am Starr with 2 R's, your teacher, your coach, and your guide for this experience. And it is my desire to support you, to keep showing up more visibly, more vulnerably, and more powerfully so the right people can find you. And so the wrong people know that you're not their person. And so you can show up more powerfully and confidently as a business owner and as a human. And of course, it's my intention to give you all the tools I can during our time together that support you. And this course is designed to help you with both the inner strength and regulation needed to show up vulnerably online, as well as some story strategies to support you in sharing how you got into this work and other powerful stories to help your people find you and decide if you're the person to guide them in the next phase of their healing journey. So that's what this course is all about. Can I share what to expect for our call today? Yes, I see some nods. Awesome. So as mentioned last week, we'll start each week with a little check-in regarding what came up the previous week and how you're feeling about your progress. And so during that time, you'll have a chance for a couple breakout connections and reflections, as well as group shares. And then we'll go over today's content, including your assignment for the week. And then we'll spend whatever time we have left on some coaching for those who would like some customized support. Sound good? Yay. So let's start by doing a check-in. So B, if you could get our breakouts ready, we're going to just dive right into a little check-in with a partner share. I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat, what you can cover during your partner share, specifically remembering that your homework was to start an evidence book around trusting in yourself and trusting in the universe and all that good stuff. And also you can make your evidence book whatever flavor you want. I got reminded by the universe that I needed to follow my own advice. So I started an evidence book, or kind of revisited my old evidence book and started adding some more stuff in around a different topic, but still that power of building evidence. And so I'm going to put in chat some questions like, how was the homework? What were your insights? What were your takeaways? Did you start your evidence book? How was that? What were your insights around that? What was valuable? So just anything that you want to share. You'll have 5 minutes total to share with a partner. Remember to look for that 2.5-minute switch broadcast at the top of the screen. And then just another reminder that when that 60-second thing pops up and says, you've got 60 seconds, don't push the button and spend that last 60 seconds with your partner. Everyone clear on what we're doing for the partner share? Awesome. I will see you in 5 minutes. Welcome back. Welcome back. So please put in the chat something you appreciate about your partner. Something you appreciate about your awesome partner. Amanda says their insight into themselves. Love that. I always appreciate people who have insight into themselves. They're my favorite kind of people. Seamus, creative applications of the course material. Love that. Dottie said she is so matter-of-fact, relaxed. Those are great. Camille, sharing ideas and their vulnerability and sharing. Love it. Janice, vibing with Dottie. Wish I could give her a big hug. Right? Dottie, I bet you give good hugs. I bet you give great hugs. Susanna, my partner is listening to the universe, setting up her future. Yes. Yay for listening to the universe. Awesome. And so I'd love to take just a couple brief group shares for anyone who wants to share anything about this last week that was, insightful for you. Dottie, go ahead.
So I finally got my 2020 taxes done. I had to done by the 15th or I lose all the money I have advanced through the years. And I'm just more resourced. I kept getting really scared and kept reminding myself I have options. My tax guy was mad at me. So I went on Facebook. Are there tax preparers in the area? Are there house cleaners in the area? I mean, all this stuff. And I kept reminding myself I have resources. I don't have to be derailed and totally paralyzed.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And do you feel like some of our work around like resilience and those inner resources has been helpful for you?
Yeah, I kept spazzing out, but I kept coming back on track.
Yes. Spazzing out is allowed as long as
Well,
we
and
come
I
back to
feel
center.
now that I'm not procrastinating so much about the taxes, I
Yeah.
feel more in charge of my life again.
I so feel that. Raise your hand if you can relate at all to what Honey just said. Yes. Yes. Can we send you some support as you continue to remember how resourced you are? Yes. Thank you, Dottie. Thanks for sharing. So glad you're here. Anyone else with a quick share on what was kind of your biggest yes over the last week, or what was most valuable for you? Susanna says, Dottie, I just did that too. Yeah, it felt pretty good to get our back taxes taken care of. As you know, we had some back taxes last year that it's just so nice to get all that done. All right. Well, since I don't see any exciting hands for the insights, the next thing that I want to do before we dive in to our content for today is celebrations and challenges. So if you remember, that's going to be an ongoing week thing. You can also think about it as wins and woes. Just try to make, one like really positive yay thing, like Dottie just did, yay taxes. And then maybe something that was like, oof, I tried to do it. And then this thing came up. We're going to do another quick partner share. This is going to go by really fast because I got a bunch of content for y'all today. So you're going to have 3 minutes total. That means 90 seconds each. It's going to go by really quick. And so just connect with yourself for a moment and think, what is the challenge I want to articulate? And what is the celebration I want to articulate? That way you don't have to make it up in the moment. So just think about that. Seamus said in the chat, face challenges that would have floored me a few years ago, and they just reminded me to ground. Yes, I love that. I can definitely relate to that. All right, so let's go ahead and if you want to put everyone in the partner shares. 3 minutes total, 90 seconds goes by fast. Celebrations and challenges. We'll see you in 90 seconds. Welcome back. Welcome back. And once again, I'm going to do it again because I just love appreciating. Something in the chat that you appreciate about your partner that time. Susanna, not enough time. I know, I told you. I told you it wasn't going to be enough time. Yes. Donnie says, Amanda is an expert. Yes, she is. Seamus, feeling deep solidarity. Yes, Amanda, her bright spirit and willingness to keep going. Love that. Susanna says, but so much in common with mom relationships. I love it when that happens. Find that sweet overlap. Love it. Camille, relatable and easy to talk to. Yes, yes, yes. Don't we have such rad people in this program? I just adore you all. And once again, I would love to give an opportunity for anyone to be vulnerably visible by raising their hand, practicing that here in this safe space, by raising their hand and sharing, a challenge or a celebration or both with the group. Anyone want to share? Janice.
Well, I, as per usual, tried to combine what we did with something else some other homework that I was given by our healer. And I'm like, and then I did it, at least I started it, but then I got confused about what I was doing. So then I'm like, well, shit. And then I'm tired at night and I'm like, screw it. I'm just going to put on Netflix, So I did start it, but yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that and your vulnerability in that. And can we send you lots of support as you navigate whatever homework you do or don't do? It's your choose your own adventure. Thank you. And then just a quick reminder that if anytime you're like, wait, what was it? Everything's in the course area and there's a little section called homework. And so you can go and revisit that at any time. And that's not to shame you or say that you did anything wrong, but just to remind you that resource is there. And anyone else want to share before we dive into our content for today? Seamus, yeah, what you got?
I also took a more creative approach to the homework aspect. And I think the universe decided it was less homework and more like final exam time. I felt very much the bracketing of working with you, Starr. Like the very first like time we worked together, there was this like key of vulnerable visibility, and it led me to take a step where I shared a poem with my family over at like a Christmas event, and was completely just not received. It was like soul crushing. I like was devastated. It sent me into depression for months. And then I think our next coaching session, you brought out the resilience like homework. And been working on that. And this has been like 5 years almost. I was doing the math. Yesterday, day before yesterday, I had nowhere to make music because the park was full, and so I just decided to play my ukulele in the backyard, just for me and kind of grieve and work. And my ma came out and offered her criticism and passive aggression and all of that, and I just kind of felt it hit me. I became a gray rock, and then she left and I kept making music, and it got a little protest song heavy after that, but I just was like, here's my resource to transmute this energy and whatnot. And I just like seeing the brackets of that, of how my nervous system is so much more resourced and resilient to essentially the same trigger in 5 years. And so I just want to so much honor to the work and that you've brought and how it's helped me, Starr. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Seamus. And way to both end it. That's like a challenge and a celebration all in one. So we send you lots of support as you continue to navigate all of that stuff, but especially continuing to be resourced and in challenging times. Thank you, Seamus. And thanks for sharing that. It's always an honor to get to support you and hear how that's landing in like real time. And I think that's a great segue into today's topic because really, we're going to be finishing out our inner assets because we've already looked, at number 1, and then last week we did like 4 and 3, and then our second inner asset and our final one is boundaries. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, I recognize that a lot of the stuff I'm going to be sharing today, some of you have been around for a while and you've probably heard some of this before. I'm going to use the same handout that I used when Amanda and I taught this material together at World Domination Summit a couple of years ago. And I encourage you to see it through the lens of vulnerable visibility and see if there's any new insights or new layers that you can tap into while we're going through this material. Because boundaries are super important in life and business, and especially important if you're showing up or attempting to show up in a more vulnerably visible way. And one of the issues I see with a lot of heart-led and conscious practitioners is they kind of do the either or extremes of little to no boundaries or boundaries so rigid and protective that no one can get in, including clients. Now, like in life, anything in life is a spectrum, right? And it's up to you to find that both and sweet spot somewhere in the middle. But let's talk about these extremes for a minute. So with no boundaries, we kind of have the energy of, sure, I'll say yes to anything. Anything's fine. It's fine. Maybe it might be a little people pleasy. It might be, we might even take it. I've met some like the love and light only people that go, well, I just need to say yes to whatever the universe brings me. And then the other end of the spectrum, we have too rigid, this energy of like, nope, I'm not saying yes to anything. Nothing's getting in here. I'm saying no to all the things. And again, your job, your task ongoing for the rest of your life is to discover and uphold whatever that sweet spot is for you. And it's not going to be one place that you land forever. It's going to, like everything, it's going to continue to shift and spiral up and all that stuff. But the problem with super open boundaries means that you're not really in charge of your own life. You'll say yes to whatever's asked of you. You're not really honoring your own needs or desires. And you may let people in to your energy field who aren't aligned for you, whether it's because you want to seem nice or easy breezy, easy going, or again, you have some of those people pleaser tendencies still at play there. And then super rigid approach to boundaries leaves you closed off to that like spontaneity of life and the possibility of the unexpected. It's almost like you're telling the universe that if whatever happens in your life isn't in your exact control, that you don't want it. And ironically, both of these extremes block receptivity. And receptivity is needed to build a business and is an important aspect of vulnerable visibility. Because if you're going to go out there and be vulnerable, but then you don't have receptivity around receiving positive attention, receiving clients, receiving income from those clients, it's going to be, you're just going to kind of like be showing up and then hiding and then showing up and then hiding, which I did for years. So there's no shame there. It's just recognizing that pattern. And the truth is, if your boundaries are too loose, then subconsciously you'll start not trusting yourself to set those boundaries. And so that your protector parts or your subconscious are going to close off your receptivity because you don't have systems in place to manage and navigate what you're receiving. So your subconscious might say something to yourself like, well, I don't want the attention of 100 people because once I show up, I don't trust myself to manage that amount of energy well and not let myself be consumed or taken advantage of. So I'll just protect myself by closing down the possibility of getting that much attention. And so it closes you off both to giving your best because you'll fear that people will take it and then want more. And it closes you off to receiving because you're so protected. And then if you're too rigid, you're closing yourself off from receptivity too, because you're dictating to the universe the exact way you'd like to receive. And I don't know about you, but I don't always get exactly what I want from the universe. I still get what I need, but it's not always exactly how my ego thinks I should be receiving it. And this is sad because there's so much more to our experience of life and business that we can fathom, which means if our boundaries are too rigid, we close ourselves off to that possibility, synchronicity, and unexpected gifts and opportunities. And so before I go into today's handout, I want to share an important story. And I'll actually be sharing a few stories as I go through our content today. And this story, if you've been following me for a while, you've probably heard this story before. And it's because it was such an important point in my own journey with boundaries. Now, this happened at a time like a decade ago or more when I was very involved in the spiritual center, the Portland Center for Spiritual Living. It's before I did years of trauma healing. And when I was still very much caught up in my need for approval and belonging, even though I had been working on those layers for some years and had been seeing slow progress. And looking back, I realized a lot of my decisions were motivated by this desire to get these little pats on the head telling me that I was a good girl and that I did it right. Plus, being raised by narcissists, I was never allowed to set boundaries. If I tried, they were punished, ridiculed, bulldozed. A lot of the stuff that Seamus was talking about in his share, I can relate to. And I was that yes girl. So at the center, I volunteered a ton of my time. And if someone asked something of me, I said yes, both because I loved serving the community and I loved being a part of something, but also because I had no boundaries. And I just wanted to please all those people, especially people that I had put above me. And so there was this one particular mentor who actually I decided to wear a necklace that was a hand-me-down from her. So I'm bringing her with me into the story with my necklace today. And her and I actually had a pretty great relationship. She was kind of a pseudo mom. She was a mentor. She was my teacher. She was my friend. We co-taught things together. We co-led rituals together. We co-led retreats together. And because of the way that I was setting up my relationships at the time, we got to the point where she didn't really even ask me to do things. She would just sort of expect me to do them. She was one of the ministers, and I was the head of the practitioners, kind of the practitioner coordinator. And she just kind of got into this habit of telling me stuff. And I remember this one particular day where, you know, here I am, I'm homeschooling my kid. I've got a busy life. My plate is full. I was also, you know, teaching. So I was like studying the lessons for that week and making sure that I was ready to teach. And she called like right when I was in the middle of a bunch of things. And she called and basically said, hey, I was driving and I was thinking of this thing that you need to do. Okay, so there's a thing for you to do. Bye. And she didn't even ask me if I could do it. She didn't ask me when I could do it. She didn't ask me about me at all. It was like, I was thinking of this thing that you needed to do for me, and then just told me. And as you can imagine, that sat kind of funkily with me. And I had been doing so much work on boundaries at that time and really looking at how I was, you know, managing my own energy and maybe not protecting it enough. And so that sat with me for a few days while I was like, what do I do? How do I sit with this? How do I show up for this and shift this? And at the time we had 2 Sunday services. There was an early morning service that was a little more meditative, and there was like a 5-minute silent meditation. And then the second service that was a little more energetic. And I was the guest vocalist for the first service. So I was like sitting up front and I did my little song and I sat down in meditation and I was bringing this and just kind of this curiosity, right? Of like, what is it about this relationship with this woman that leads her to believe that I'm like her assistant that she doesn't even have to ask or appreciate? Like, what's that about? So I was just kind of holding this lightly. And even just remembering the image, I'm starting to already get chills up my arms, but I had this really powerful image. Now, I want to caveat this image by saying, I don't actually believe in like a dude in the sky as God with like a white robe and a beard. Like, that's not my model of the divine at all. And yet it was in this particular image, this vision that I had. And it was kind of like the dude with the long beard and the white robe, and he's sitting at the table, this like wooden table, and there was this big golden platter in the middle, and it had all this red, like I want to say like mana, like life stuff, you know, just like energy of life. And he was sitting there and he was just like eating this, whatever it was. And every now and then there'd be like a little leftover scrap and he'd toss it on the floor. And there I was on the floor, about the size of his foot, naked in the fetal position. And every time a little scrap would fall, I'd go, oh, thank you so much. Whatever you can spare, whatever you can spare. And even though I'm saying that, like, I just want to shake that energy off because I was sort of disgusted by it. And I was disgusted by it because it was pretty fucking accurate as to how I was showing up in the world. And I realized that most of my motivation, why I did the things that I did, was I was motivated by these tiny little scraps of attention, these tiny little scraps of pats on the head, good girl, you did a good job. And it grossed me out. And in this vision, when I realized this, I like grew myself to the size of God and I pulled out a seat at the table and I sat down and I got my own fucking plate. And that was a life-changing moment for me. And then I had a chat with my mentor. And what I did was I actually apologized, but here's what I apologized for. I said, you know, I want to apologize for how I have set up our relationship, because I have set up our relationship in a way that has led you to believe that I would say yes to whatever you ask of me. And that's because I was motivated from a place of getting pats on the head and being told that I was a good girl and that I did it right. And I need to renegotiate. I need to set some new parameters because my life is full. I'm a mom. I got lots going on. And so if you are going to call me, first you're going to ask me what you need from me, and I get to choose whether or not I'm going to do it and when I'm going to do it. And it's got to be on my own time. And that was probably one of the most self-validated things that I had done at that point in my journey. To stand up to this woman who I had great respect for, who I had been in relationship for a decade or more, and be like, I'm going to take ownership for how I set up this relationship. and we're not doing this anymore. And so I share that story out of hope that you can relate to some part of it, whether now or sometime in the past, or you may have been motivated by love and approval versus offering value, coming from a place of service, and also sovereignty and owning your own life. And remember that this isn't about judgment, but about that curiosity of wondering where you are on your boundaries journey and where your current boundaries could use some improvement. And boundaries will continue to be a growth edge for me. I feel pretty dang strong on my boundaries now, and I know that they'll have to keep growing with me. And so after years of working on boundaries, years ago, I created a class called Bold Boundaries for Bold Leaders. And I want to share some of the stuff in that with you today. And so I'm going to share my screen, and don't worry, this handout will be in your members area. So we're going to start by looking at warning signs of unhealthy, incomplete, or just lack of boundaries. So just invite you to notice if any of these resonate with you. So some warning signs that you might need to up your boundary game a little bit. Resentment and or bitterness, regular cycles of overwhelm and burnout, fear of rejection if you put you first. This is one I used to do a lot, which is saying yes when you mean no, which then leads to backing out of commitments at the last minute regularly, which I was also doing because I was saying yes to way too many things. And I wasn't actually aligned with all those things. And I hadn't even taken the time to check in with myself if I was aligned with all those things. And just a general sense of feeling like your life is not your own. So these are all warning signs that, okay, it might be time to look at some boundaries and do some boundary work. And then roadblocks to bold boundaries, meaning that these might get in the way of you actually getting to up your boundary game. The first one is just not believing that you're worthy of an amazing life. And so any sort of worthiness or unworthiness stuff is going to get in the way of you really owning your life and setting bold boundaries. Another is disconnection from or distrust of your internal guidance system. Now, as someone who was raised by a narcissist, my internal guidance system was screaming all sorts of things that it wasn't safe in my world to follow those or to listen to those things. And so, of course, after years and years and years, that internal guidance system went way underground. And it took me years of rebuilding that trust with my inner guidance system to where I could hear it again and to where it would trust that if it spoke up, I would listen, right? And then fearing judgment from others or displeasing others. This is especially important in vulnerable visibility. And I'm going to talk a little bit at the end about this. But if you're trying to please all your followers online, that's never going to work. And it's going to be exhausting because there's always going to be a big group of people who disagree with everything, no matter what you say. And so trying to please them is not your job. Another roadblock is the habitual bending to the will of others. And this goes along with relationships with people who make you wrong for saying no, which I definitely, because of my, how I was raised, I had lots of friends who just bulldozed my boundaries. And I would, she would call, I had a friend who would call and be like, I'm going to come over, and be like, oh, please don't. The kids are about to go to bed and whatever I was going to say. Oh, come on. I'm right in the area. Just let me stop by for a minute. Right? Ew. And so, but that was what felt like love to me because that was how I was raised, with people who would just bulldoze my boundaries. And no, that person and I are not friends anymore, but this is a long time ago. And so I'm stopping my screen share, and I would love to hear from a couple of you, in a few sentences. You can put in the chat or you can share, verbally, what's coming up for you around this. Are you having any insights that you want to share? Yeah, Janice.
Ooh, taking up space again.
Yeah, take up space, Janice.
So I wrote down all of the people that I've set boundaries with that decided they were no longer friends with me. It's just interesting how people, and they're all probably narcissists, because it's like you set a boundary with them and they just don't accept it. And I never said, I don't want to be friends with you, but then they just say, you're not a good friend. And it's like, I just have a boundary.
Yeah.
And I wrote down all the names of the people, and they're all like, it's all the same issue, really.
Thank you for bringing that up. And I'm actually going to speak to that in a little bit, but thanks for sharing. Can we send your beautiful heart some love for even the littlest of parts of you that are like, well, but even if you know better, even if you know they're a narcissist, it still stings to have people be like, oh, you set a boundary? Well, bye. You know, so yeah, exactly. Thank you. Thank you, Janice. Anyone else want to share what this brought up for you looking at these? And it's fine if not, I just want to give space. Yeah, Dottie.
I did it all. And I've always been a people pleaser, and I've always held my tongue. When I did some trauma releasing exercises work with the gal a few years ago, and she had me put the ball between my knees and the ball between my hand to get my muscles going to start releasing trauma. My head was going like this. And I said, that's all the no's I never said.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah. And I'm better at it now. Being the weight I am, and I can't do much of anything, there's a lot of no in that. Because it keeps me from doing all kinds of stuff. But I'm better at saying, okay, I will be too tired to do that, so I'm not going to do that.
Mhm.
I'm not going to overschedule. I just don't overschedule myself like I used to.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yay. Well, I want to acknowledge, those no's that had to take years to be heard. And so thank you for hearing them.
Mm-hmm.
Can we send you some support as you continue to discern what you want to say yes to and what you want to say no to? Yeah, thank you. And so much like we did the very first week when we looked at roadblocks, I want to give you just one more minute to look. I'm going to share my screen in a second, and to just look at this list of roadblocks and think which ones you might have. And also, are there other roadblocks that I haven't written down that you want to just acknowledge that could be a roadblock for you as you're setting boundaries and getting more visible? So I'm just going to share my screen again one more time. That is not it. There we go. That's the one. And so just looking at those roadblocks, just make note for yourself which ones are most present for you. And maybe you want to write down and acknowledge any others that might get in the way for you. I know for me, when I was just getting started, just not knowing how was a roadblock for me. Like, that sounds nice, but how do I do it? Just another 20 seconds or so to consider that for yourself. All right, before we move on, does anyone want to share any roadblocks you wrote down that weren't on the list? Dottie and then B, yeah.
Well, a fear of saying what I want,
Mm-hmm.
like to the universe, claiming I want this, I want that.
Yeah.
I cry about things. I want this, I want this, I want this, but it's not like stated in a real grounded, positive way. And for years I said, I just took my marbles and went in the corner when I was a kid. I just retreated. Freeze and retreat has been my favorite strategy for years. And it has left me with some consequences I didn't really like. I mean, I'm invisible. And getting out of being invisible is a challenge.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge that the way you powerfully named that, like not really the, you know, the fear of letting the universe know what you really want. Like that's legit. That's valid. I could definitely resonate with that. Raise your hand if you can resonate with that at all. Yeah. Can we send you some support as you navigate those roadblocks for yourself with
Thank you.
curiosity, not judgment? Thank you, Doc. And then B, what you got?
Just because it just jumped up when I was looking at this, it's like believing because something happened once, it's always true.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be something that's really stopping me right now.
Is there any more detail you want to share about that, or you just want to leave it general for right now? Either way is fine.
I don't think it'd be useful to.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Can we send you support as you shift that belief and remember that just because it happened doesn't mean it's going to happen again? Yeah, thank you. Amanda said in the chat, I don't trust others to do what I want or need them to do, so I have to do it all. Cannot delegate. I can definitely relate to that one. Yes. Raise your hand if you can relate to that one. Yes. I just had a task this morning that I was like, I'm going to sit down and do this. I'm like, I have a VA. I'm like, Starr, send this to your VA. Like she can do it. And she did it in like 5 minutes. But I had that initial, like, I guess I have to sit down and do all the things now. And I've had a VA for 2 years. And so I definitely relate to that. Can we send you some support as you continue to build your trust with others and surround yourself around people who can be trusted? Thank you, Amanda. So this kind of goes to what Janice was talking about a moment ago. And I'm going to share something. Oh, Susanna said, I don't even know what I want sometimes. It's hard to set a boundary when you don't know what they are. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And can we send you some support as you decide what is it that you actually even want? Awesome. Thank you, Susanna, for sharing. Definitely can relate to that one too. So I'm just going to share a little bit of a reframe around this idea of setting boundaries with people, especially those closer to us. This applies a little bit less as far as like wider internet audience. But we teach others how to treat us by how we treat ourselves and what we put up with. That's why if people see us better than we see ourselves, we get really uncomfortable. Right? So if you think about a thermostat and it's set to 70 or whatever it is, you know, if it gets too hot, it's going to cool that down. And the same thing, if it gets too cold, it's going to heat that up. And there was a quote from Don Miguel Ruiz that I read years ago that just hit me in the gut a little bit, but is so important. I don't remember which book. It's either The 4 Agreements or The Art of Relationships. And he says that we surround ourselves with people who abuse us about as much as we abuse ourselves. And so kind of Janice's point is as we treat ourselves better, then we start putting up with less abuse. It's like changing that thermostat, right? And when we do that, one of 2 things will happen. And I've had both of these things happen. And one of them is exactly what Janice said, which is we set the boundary, we start to treat ourselves better. We say, this is how I need to be treated. And they blow up, make us wrong and fail. Raise your hand if you've had that happen, where you set the boundary, they make you the asshole, and then they bail, right? So that's the first thing. But then there's another thing where people can maybe be uncomfortable for a minute, but that they're willing to renegotiate and they're willing to raise up how they treat us. Now, in business, it's super important. This is another thing about boundaries I want to name, that it's super important to teach others how to treat us with respect and to honor our boundaries right away. Because how we start a relationship with someone is what they will continue to expect from us. So if you start by being super people-pleasing and overgiving, and then later have to scale back because that's not sustainable, they will feel like you have taken something from them. And in a way you have, because you broke the unspoken agreement that they could take X amount from you. And that's why they make you the asshole, because there was this unspoken agreement that this is about how much I could take from you. And then you changed the rules, and now I'm mad at you. And so that's why people expect us to keep showing up the way we always have. And we, super short story, my husband and I, years ago, like 15 years ago, we had to get some roommates, and we had some people staying with us that they said they were only going to stay for a few weeks. So we rolled out the red carpet. We wanted to be super generous. We wanted to be seen as good people and generous people. And then they ended up staying a year and a half. And what we had given them the first 2 weeks was not what we were able to give them. Things like, you know, if you have to buy your own razors, and if you use all the spices, you need to replace the spices, like stuff like that. And then when we went to set boundaries, and I thought I was being really nice, I put it all out in a letter and listed all the things that I needed to change. Shit got ugly real quick, and they made us the bad guys. And when my husband and I were sitting down going like, what happened? I was like, well, we did this to ourselves. We set this up this way. We set the expectations up at the beginning that they could take and take and take and take, that we were pushovers, and that we would just give whatever we had. And so same thing with clients, new clients. Part of boundaries is setting expectations. So real quick now, I'm going to read through our side effects of setting bold boundaries. So, warning. Side effects of setting bold boundaries may stir up relationships where people have been benefiting from you always saying yes. Bring up shame or regret for not setting boundaries sooner in life. It may show you areas of inner work to focus on or get support around. Big warning here, it may create more time in your life for fun and play. It may connect you more deeply with your higher self. Setting bold boundaries may attract people and experiences that honor your deepest needs and desires. And you might even increase trust in yourself and your own power to choose. So just warning, before you embark upon this journey, these are things that could happen to you. And then I also want to share these mindsets. So these are some mindsets, you might want to call them affirmations, but these are some mindsets that you can return to if you're getting stirred up. Thinking about that it's safe to ask for what you need, that you're worthy of creating a life that works for you. When your cup is full, you give to others from a sense of plenty. That you surround yourself with people who respect and honor your boundaries. And that your life is your own, and you're willing to listen to and act on your needs and desires. And so feel free to use those or to make your own. So I know that I've been sharing a lot of stories, but it's because this has been a growth edge for me for a long time. I've had a lot of experience navigating these challenges. And because this program is also about sharing vulnerable stories. And so I want you to see the power of being on the receiving end of that. And so another story for me that was really important around my boundaries. And so I mentioned this friend who would always bulldoze my boundaries. Well, her and I were pretty involved in the spiritual center together, and we had attended the spiritual women's retreat a couple of years together. And she was a very loud, take up a lot of space in the room kind of person. I think that's why I was drawn to her. And then when her and I stopped being friends, because, you know, I set that boundary and she made me the asshole and bailed, I went to the women's retreat without her. And I was feeling very exposed without her kind of right there being the life of the party. And I was navigating a lot of these layers around boundary setting and friendship. And I was a roommate with another woman who was at the center with me, another practitioner who I adored and who I had known for a long time. And I remember coming back to my room and really wanting to go journal about what was coming up for me at the end of the day. And there was this little bench that I had written a song on years ago. And I was like, I just wanted to grab my journal and go to this bench and do some journaling and reflect on what was up for me. And so she goes, oh, hi, what are you doing? What are you up to? And I go, oh, I'm going to go, walk to this bench and I'm going to journal. And she goes, can I go with you? And I wanted to say no, because I really needed to be by myself and I needed to process, and I had a lot of stuff up for me. But I was still a wee baby at setting boundaries. And so I did the best that I could, and I set half a boundary. And I said, well, you can follow me to the bench, but once I get to the bench, I'd really like to sit there and journal and be left alone. And then she said the thing that changed my life, to where I'm still getting emotional thinking about it. And I had never heard this before. And she put her hand on my shoulder and she looked me right in the eyes and she said, thank you for asking for what you need. I had never had anyone to respond to a boundary like that before. Not only was she respecting my boundary, she was thanking me for setting it. And so now that phrase is a huge part of my language. I use it all the time with friends and clients, especially if someone's like, oh, well, I'm not sure, but like, is it okay if maybe I ask for what I need? And I look them right in the eye and I go, thank you for asking for what you need. And I see the impact of it every fucking time. And so I want you to fathom that as you're practicing these skills, that you'll continue to attract people who appreciate your bold and clear boundaries. And so we're almost done with our training time, but I want to show you, oh, you're like, okay, this is great, Starr, but how do I freaking do it? What is a bold boundary? What do I do? So let's look at that together. So back to our handout. So I like to say that bold boundaries have 3 components. One is they're unapologetic. Please don't apologize for wanting to set it. Oh, I'm really sorry, but I can't. You don't have to be sorry. You're just allowed to can't. That's okay. The other is explanation free. This was a big part of my journey. I still remember at the spiritual center, it was Linda Rossi, the music director, and I will always adore her for this. She goes, Starr, you don't have to explain to anyone why you just said no. Just say no. And again, I had never heard this before. I was like, what? And always, as always, it's a both and. There's always room for situations where maybe you're offering up an explanation for context. But the danger zone in this is explanations are often seen as the start of negotiation. And so often by taking the time to explain to someone why you're setting a boundary, it gets their logic turning and they're thinking of a reason why they can talk you out of your boundary. Now, this is not 100% true. And again, there's always room for both and nuance in here. But especially with people who aren't your super inner circle, especially with like strangers on the internet, you don't have to explain to anyone why you're doing what you're doing and when you're doing it. And so explanation free, I encourage you to practice that and notice the part of you that has been well trained to explain to someone else why you're setting the boundary, because that part is trying to get their approval. It's trying to get their approval for your right to set a boundary. And you don't need anyone else's approval for your right to set a boundary. And then the third component is that it comes from a place of self-worth and self-value. And this is really important because a lot of our boundaries come from a place of fear and lack. And this is different to go, oh no, I'm afraid this is going to happen. And so I need to set a boundary and protect myself. That's a very different energy than I know myself well enough to know that's not going to work for me. I love myself enough to not put myself in that situation. And so I need to set a boundary. It might look the same on the outside, but it depends on where you're coming from on the inside. And then the 3 steps to setting a boundary, and this kind of goes back to what Susanna was saying, is first you have to decide, right? Now, I want to give you a caveat that I really wanted all 3 of these to be D's, and I'm not completely satisfied with my final D, but I'll get there in a minute. But first of all, you have to decide both that you're worth it, that you're worth setting these boundaries, and also what it is. And sometimes that takes some time to check out, like, what do I actually want? What am I actually okay with and not okay with, right? That takes a lot of self-knowing and self-ownership and all that good stuff. So first you decide what is the boundary, and then you declare, you communicate it. You know, whether it was me writing a list to the roommates who kept using my spices, whether it was me calling out, you know, my mentor lovingly and saying, hey, I need to renegotiate this, or me telling the person, you know, I'd really like to go to that bench and sit by myself, right? It was communicating those needs. And then this D, I don't want it to seem like defend means like get defensive, but it really means to stand in your power and not back down. That if the person gets the idea that this is a negotiable conversation, this is a negotiation, you're going to say, oh, you know, I actually didn't mean for this to be a negotiation. I was just letting you know what was going on with me. Or some other gentle way to do that. But allow your belief in your own worthiness and setting those boundaries to hold. And then there's some inner work and some outer work that I recommend you check out more on the handout, which again will be available for you. And so that brings me to our homework. So your homework for this week, if you choose to accept it, is to look at an area, name an area in your business where you either have too tight or too loose boundaries that are holding you back in some way. Make a plan, an agreement with yourself, and then get the support that you need here or with others to keep building that boundary muscle. So I just put that in the chat. And again, this will also be in your course area once I upload everything in there. And if you want to do a little more work around your roadblocks, you can do that too, but that's totally optional. And then as I was in the shower today, I was like, I've got my everything ready for today. I had some ideas. And so I'm going to share with you just a final little thought before I let you go. And this isn't in the handout yet, so I can't share my screen and show it, but I'll add it later before I upload it into the members area. 3 things to remember specifically with social media boundaries. You don't owe anyone anything on social media unless they paid you and it's agreed upon that you owe them that, right? But if we're talking building an audience, building followers, sharing your story vulnerably, navigating comments, navigating feedback or private messages, is you actually don't owe anyone anything. And you get to decide, right, how much attention you want to give any one comment, any one message, any bit of feedback about what you have going on. The second thing I want to remind you around social media boundaries is you're not on call. So that means that even if you are going to respond, you get to do it on your own time. You don't have to respond right away just because you saw it right away. You are allowed, if it triggers you and you do want to respond, you're allowed to take care of your own energy and then come back from a resourced place. And then finally, social media boundaries. If someone's draining you, block them and release them into the universe lovingly. You don't have to engage with people. There was a couple women who I let take up space on my social media for years, and they would post like paragraphs long things that were not even on point with the point I was trying to make. And it was like they were trying to drum up all this attention and energy and pity. And I finally just had to bless them and remind myself that they are sovereign beings, fully capable and connected to the universe, and that it actually wasn't serving me or my people to have them continue to comment on my page. It is your page, it's your space. You can decide who gets in there and who doesn't. Seamus said, just reframe social media as my no automation engine, allowing the people who aren't for me to say no to my content before they drain my energy. Yes, love that. Yay for boundaries. And so those are my 3 little tips. And then there's a whole page in the handout of some suggestions for boundaries in every area of life. But the final thing I want to say is your subconscious is here to protect you, right? And so if you don't trust yourself to set healthy boundaries with coworkers, colleagues, clients, and followers, you will subconsciously hold back out of fear of what you let in the floodgates. And as your visibility grows, your boundaries will need to continue to be upgraded. This is an ongoing practice as your audience and what is expected of you continues to expand. And so this is not a one and done, like, check, I did boundaries. This is an upward spiral where just when you start to get comfortable, like, yeah, I can set this kind of boundaries, a new kind of opportunity to grow is going to show up for you. And to just remember that doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It's actually a sign that you're growing and you're expanding and you have capacity for more. So that is my content for y'all today. AFGO, that's right. Another fucking growth opportunity. Yes, yes, yes. And so I want to thank you all today. I hope that this was helpful. And we've got about 20 minutes to support anyone in the hot seat who would like some coaching from me. Now, this can be something that I mentioned today you want some support around, or just anything from, today in the past, the last 3 weeks of material, maybe something that you hit a snag in your homework, but something around vulnerable visibility that we, have already covered.
I'm not asking for coaching, but there's one thing that just really is asking to come up.
Yeah.
And the image that came for me as we were talking about boundaries and things was a sneaker wave. And those of you who know the Oregon coast especially know that, like, it doesn't matter how strong a swimmer you are, it doesn't matter how prepared you are, they could come at any time and just take you away. And I'm really present to, like, I have prepared for lots of things, riptides, whatever. Swimming metaphors over. But that the sneaker waves are always out there. That it's to kind of affirm that it's okay in the learning process. That I will just find myself waking up in this codependent, like, energy drain. How did I get here? Whatever. And that's normal and natural and okay, even for the most resourced kind of person.
Yes, I love that. Thank you, Seamus. Yes, because we're so quick to make ourselves wrong and go, wait, I thought I did this already. And you did. And now there's another layer presenting itself for you. And that's okay too. Thank you, Seamus. Camille, you want to hop in the hot seat?
I think so. I guess trying to figure out how to frame this. But first, Seamus, I really like that metaphor, and that seemed helpful. So that's kind of where I'm at with I do a lot of work around boundaries and help clients with boundaries, and then noticing where there's, new layers of, oh, wait, I didn't know that was a boundary I might have to set. So I'm kind of struggling with where this idea, how to sort of set good boundaries right from the beginning. And so there's sort of like, I do consultation calls or, consultation meetings with client or with prospective clients as part of, like, okay, how can we set good boundaries and expectations from the beginning? But now I've had somebody who even like pushed for wanting that they're feeling really nervous before the consultation and want more info on like what questions I'm going to ask. So trying to figure out how to set that where I can appreciate, like, okay, you're feeling nervous. It seems like there might be some like language issues maybe for this person, but also I can't always predict every single thing I'm going to ask you in a consultation either. So kind of, sort of some of those things of sort of feeling like this, like, okay, I can, I get like that idea of like, okay, how can I sort of appreciate this person trying to ask for what they need and also not just automatically like give too much of, oh yes, I can, of course I can do all these things, of like, wait, where can we kind of meet this in the middle?
Yeah, definitely. I love that. And thank you for asking that. What's funny is when I do my bold boundaries workshop, like in person, it's like a 2 hour workshop, and I have people do lots of like partner experientials. And one of the things I have people practice is to ask a thing, and then, partner A asks the thing, and then partner B just goes, oh, thank you for asking, but no. So I feel like I just want to start by saying, like, you already kind of had that response and you're just figuring out how to articulate it, but you kind of said that, like, thank you for asking, because I do appreciate you asking for what you need. That doesn't mean that I can always accommodate every need, but I still appreciate the ask. And so,
Right.
and so going back to this, I find that happens a lot when people want to know my pricing. And of course, I want to be transparent about my pricing. And I've got a lot of different things going on. I've got the membership, I've got private things, I've got courses, it so depends on what people need. And that to me is the purpose of a consultation, is for me to see what their needs are and see if I am even a good match. Because if I don't think I can help them, I'm not going to recommend anything. I'm going to refer them to someone else. Right. And so that's what that conversation is for. And so,
right, exactly. Yeah, because I think that's sort of how this feels too, is like, okay, well, if you are feeling too overwhelmed trying to talk to me in a consultation, then that seems like this is going to be really hard to do any work too.
absolutely. And so if I were you, I would say something along the lines of what you already sort of led to, but just in my own words, make it your own. But, oh, thank you so much for asking that. And while, I try to be as accommodating as possible, this conversation really is the first step. There aren't any steps in front of that. Oh, did you freeze? I want to make sure that you can hear me. Okay, cool. Looks like you just froze for a moment. Can you hear me now? I see everyone else's face is moving. Oh, there you are.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Not sure if that's my end, your end, but yeah, it got a little.
Yes. Yeah. And I would say, really acknowledge their bravery in asking. Like, I know that it can be really scary asking for what you need. And while I try to be, accommodating, this call is really the first step and I don't always ask the same questions. And, and I'm not going to recommend working together if I don't think I can help you. And so, this call really is the beginning of the conversation. And if that feels, like too much for you, I bless you, and let me know if you want to schedule it for another time. And then just really like hold firm that, if you would like my support, this is where we begin with a conversation. How is that landing?
Okay. I think well, I guess partly where it always feels uncomfortable trying to set a new boundary, and I guess occasionally some of that maybe distrust too, like, am I being too rigid, but also, again, yeah, like trying to find that sweet spot of, I don't want to be too closed off, but I also don't want to, sort of set this up as, oh, I'm gonna, be able to provide, be overly accommodating either.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, in my experience, if the person that I'm reaching out to is immediately pushing up against what I have set up and wants to do it their particular way, that's going to be a pattern. That's
right,
going to be how they treat everything. And so again, kind of coming back to that, how you start the relationship is what they will expect. If you start bending into places that you're uncomfortable with now, they're going to continue to expect that from you. And I think in my experience, my people, the people who have gotten the most value out of working from me really appreciate my clear boundaries, that helps them to feel safe and to know where I stand. And that if you're already, you know, like you said, if they're already pushing up against that, they might not be a good fit. And it might save you a lot of time to just make that stance now. Like, here's how I start my conversations with potential clients. And I totally understand if that doesn't work for you. But this is how I do the thing. It'd be like going to a doctor's office and being like, can you just tell me what the medicine is? And they're like, well, I actually have to sit down with you and do an exam. And, you know, like there's protocols for a reason. And so I would say,
Right, for sure.
take a strong stance in your protocol. I don't think you're being too rigid at all. I think having a clear protocol that everyone who comes into you follows is clean. And if that doesn't align with them, then they can find someone else that is maybe more accommodating or has different ways to come in. But I don't think that you're doing anything wrong by saying, yeah, that's not going to work for me. Here's how I start. Does that work for you?
That's always helpful to remember. I think it's, you know, again, that sort of maybe when it's like that new layer of like, oh, nobody's ever asked that before. So I think that, you know, that pause of like, well, is there a little place of, you know, try, you know, like where that line is of like, okay, I want to, you know, help you feel prepared for, you know, what we're going to talk about, but also that it, isn't exact, like can't be exactly, here's, you know, 5 questions. Like it's not an interview of like, here's the,
Right.
you know, 5 questions. Like we do need to have a conversation. So
Yeah. And maybe it might help them to let them know that this is a great practice for how sessions are going to be. Because
right,
you're not going to be providing them with a list of questions before each session, because that's really an in the moment thing. I see Amanda laughing, right? Could you imagine?
Right, yeah, exactly. So yeah, I guess that was, you know, a little bit of just the like, okay, maybe there is just, you know, like not trying to be overly accommodating, but more of the, well, is there a little bit of maybe this really is totally new to you and you don't like you don't realize like this is, you know, like part of the process is you know, we're like sort of talking about things in a new way. So how can, you know, like, is there a little bit of information that maybe is helpful to set up ahead of time?
Yeah. And I think that's a great, you know, that's giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
If you're, you know, like maybe they just don't understand how this works, and you can say that, just be like, I appreciate you asking. And just so you know how this works, like, I don't email out all the questions because we're having a conversation, like we're going to have a conversation, and that's where I'm going to gather the information. And the only thing that you need to do to be prepared is to be fully present and not distracted. We'll cover everything on our call. You know, and that's about the best I can do to help you prepare for that. And like Amanda said in the chat, I wonder if they're expecting a full assessment in that initial consultation, right? Like you would go to a doctor and they're really like, okay, well, you take this and this and this and this. And so it's.
That's or I appreciate that too. Yeah, I think more like, okay, maybe you haven't done this before, and just like, okay, can I be a little clearer on just this is the point of it without it being here's, you know, these questions or something.
Exactly.
So a little bit. Well, and I think or I guess what feels hard is I've only had email exchanges with this person so far. So that's sort of part of why I like to have a consult, is so like, okay, like, so we can talk about this during a consult, and because it feels harder to me to try to articulate everything in an email in the first place sometimes.
Absolutely. And just be like, you know, and you can even say that and just be like, I totally get that you have some questions. That's what the consultation's for. You know, like that's where you can ask those questions and get them answered. And that's where I'm going to ask some questions to learn a little bit more about you. And I find, you know, that digital communication is not the best place to have that conversation.
Right. Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, I think that's reassuring for me, because then and then again, that, you know, if that's really what this person needs, then there might be someone else who, you know, or some other way they could get that, but that's not going to work for me. I'm not going to do messaging, assessment questions or something. That doesn't work for me.
Exactly. And I want to just acknowledge that how easy it is to question ourselves, to be like, should I? Like, this isn't, they're not asking for too much, right? And
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Where it's like a little, yeah, like sort of pushing a little bit or,
Mhm.
but yeah.
And so what helps me in those moments is to be
Mhm.
like, if I did this for everyone, would this be sustainable?
Okay, that's helpful because I could see there occasion like some things where it's like that might be sustainable, or yeah, like one ask might be sustainable, but not
Yeah.
all of that.
Because again, we teach people how to treat us, and you don't know how, they might have 10 friends that they go, you should call Camille. She'll give you all the questions before. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to set yourself up for something like that. And so sometimes I have to like take it to an
Mhm.
extreme for me to validate, like, yeah, no, that's actually not a good idea, Star. And so just want you to know that you didn't do anything wrong by being in that. I'm not sure, like,
Mhm.
you're coming from a good place. You want to be accommodating. You want them
Right.
to feel comfortable and safe.
Yeah, I think that was part, yeah, like sort of wanting to validate that uncertainty. And that is part of the point, is so we can see if we can talk or not, or if that's going to feel too uncomfortable. Maybe that might mean it's just not the right fit, or if they need, yeah, they might need some other service or, higher level of care than what I can do. And
Exactly.
that's okay too. Like, yeah,
Absolutely.
ultimately wanting someone to find the best fit if they do, yeah, need something different.
Yeah. Seamus put in the chat, follow the story to the end to see if you want to start. Love that. It's like,
Mm.
and I think that's an important thing, that I've had to do. Again, it's like, okay, kind of going back to that roommates thing. Like, I know I want to be nice
Mhm.
and accommodating, but if they're going to be here for a year and a half, am I going to be able to keep this up?
Right. Yes. No, thank you for sharing that story. That does seem like a very extreme example, or just that, yeah, that went
It
on for so long.
was painful. It was
Sure.
painful. But
Yeah.
AFGO, another fucking growth opportunity. Now I get to teach all of you guys from my pain.
Yes.
Yeah, and then I want to offer just a
Mhm.
suggestion if it
Mhm.
feels supportive. If you want, you could post like what you're thinking of replying to them in an email in the
Mm.
Vulnerable Visibility 101 Facebook group, because I
Mhm.
saw a lot of nods and stuff as you were chatting, and then maybe just ask for feedback to see if anyone here has any suggestions. And you don't have to do that if that feels too vulnerable, or like you get 10 different people saying 10 different things. But just
Mhm.
a thought, as a resource, you can utilize us. We are here.
Well, thank you. I think just helpful. So just knowing that could be an option, and I guess also sort of weighing, like, I don't want to take too long.
Right.
Like, there's a little
Totally
bit of
get
a time on this too. Like, I have sat on it for a day, so I was not that I was like, oh, I need to respond instantly, but I
that.
do need, there is a little bit of a time constraint on
Yeah,
needing to follow up with this person too.
definitely. Definitely.
But yeah. I think just, yeah, appreciate just being able to talk it through a little bit. I think feels better. And I guess also just some of that where you just kind of feel like when there's a another layer, like that's one thing that's weighing on me. And then of course, like feeling like, oh, my week just feels a little busier, and just kind of noticing where it just feels like like several little things kind of all at once around boundaries. So
Mhm. Isn't that funny how that works when we're working on something? The universe gives us lots of opportunities to practice.
yeah, sometimes a few more than I would want. So like I already, like, so this is sort of weighing on me. And then of course, like, my mom decided to leave me a voicemail last night, and I always feel like it's hard to
Mhm.
keep phone calls with her to like a reasonable time. So
Yes. Yes. And then, of course, one more person asking for our thing. Sometimes we can get to that point where we're like, just say yes to the thing. It's easier. Right.
oh,
We've got all those things piling. And so I just want to acknowledge you for noticing that and for taking the time to get some support around it so that you can set yourself up for success. Whether this client decides to have a consultation or not, you're
mhm.
being clear on what's okay with you. And then again, like, decision fatigue is a thing. And the more clear you can be on
Sure.
what your boundaries are, then the next time something like this happens, you don't have to spend any more time deciding because you already decided.
Yeah, that's helpful too. Yeah, because I feel like I was putting a little more thought into it, but it is also like no one's ever asked that before, and
Right.
several years. So
Mhm.
yeah, like once I create or set that sort of boundary for myself, I don't have to go through this part of the process again.
Absolutely. And this is how we learn. Like the little
Totally.
container thing that I do around coaching, which I completely forgot to do today, please forgive me, but that I normally
Mm.
set the container of coaching beforehand. I created that because the very first time I ever did my monthly luncheon, I offered 7 minutes of coaching to someone in the room. They raised their hand, and then someone else started coaching them.
Okay.
And I went, oh, I need to make it really clear that I'm the coach in the room for this section. Because I'm asking a bunch of coaches to sit into a room, and then someone's going to ask for support. And then it was someone telling me that someone came up to them after their coaching
Mm.
and trying to sell their services that made me set the parameter, like, don't go up to people afterwards. So it's like it's these experiences that
Mhm.
bring us to the point of awareness that we even need the boundary in the first place. And so that's how all this stuff gets built.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. That's helpful. Just as, yeah, validation too, that, oh yeah, it's okay. I didn't think of everything ahead of time.
Nope.
That's part of the process.
Exactly. Well, can we send you lots of support as you set these boundaries for yourself and with your people, trusting that the right people will come and the wrong people will be like, meh, she's not for me. Thank you, Camille.
Yeah.
I
thanks,
bet you
yeah.
are I bet you are a wonderful therapist.
Oh, well, thank you, Dottie.
And never having sampled your coaching or your therapy, but I bet you're really good.
Agreed.
Well, I think that's helpful just to, or at least just hear that you have some, sense of that. And obviously, I know there's people who I work really well with, and a few people who have not been a good fit, and that's okay too. So also that I know that's okay that when I'm not the right person for everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you, Camille. And yeah, I just spoke at an event on Saturday and I got 8 consultations. Woo, woo, woo. And I already know that like 2 of them are not probably going to be a good fit if they want specific business strategy, because they don't have businesses that I have a bunch of experience helping with. So we're going to have our conversation. And if all they want is inner support, I'll be like, yeah, I can help with that. But if they want some business strategy that's outside of my wheelhouse, I'll be like, gosh, that sounds really great. And I would be doing you a disservice to have you pay me for that, because I don't actually know how to set up a hair product line. That's outside of my wheelhouse, right? Even if you're coming from a healing place with it. And so I think we get to have those conversations and decide what we're okay with for us, and also what we think is okay for them. So beautiful. Well, thank you all so much. Before I let you go, I just want to remind you that next week, same time, same bat channel. And this is kind of the end of our arc around inner assets. And so continue to play with these ideas of boundaries in your homework for this week. And then next week, we're going to be looking a little bit more into who are your people, so that we can start to kind of use that as the foundation for the origin story that I'm going to help you write, that will be the most powerful for your people. And so I would love to hear, before we sign off for today, what has been valuable for you today? What are you walking away from our time together, where it's something I said or something someone else said? Any ahas, insights, breakthroughs, valuable things that you want to share, Dottie?
Last year sometime I decided I'd just hang up my shingle as a psychic reader. And a Thrive person contacted me. She wanted a psychic reading about her business. And at one point I said something. She said, oh, no, that's not true. It's like, and I just caved. I ran away. It was so uncomfortable. She just said, no, that's not true. Instead of, I wonder what you meant by that. And so I didn't want to be a psychic out there anymore. And so for me, a boundary, don't tell me my perception is wrong. Please ask yourself, where did that come from? Because you need to be curious about it. Because I get stuff, and you may not meet your expectation, and you may think it's wrong, but I get stuff, and it's usually pretty accurate.
I've received a session from you, and I can agree. It's pretty accurate. Thank you, Dottie. Can we send you support as you navigate those boundaries and powerful and self-affirming ways. Thank you, Dottie. Anyone else want to share insight or something valuable from today?
A clarification ask.
Say that again.
I have a clarification ask.
Yeah.
So our homework is the name and area in our business where it's either too loose or too tight boundaries.
Yep.
Okay.
Make a plan and get support if needed.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Amanda. Anyone else want to share? Want to practice being vulnerably visible and taking up space? B.
It might be useful, but I think I'm probably going to do the homework around roadblocks instead of boundaries. Just throwing that out there.
Beautiful. Thank you, B. As always, I'm a huge fan of making it work for you and taking the parts that feel resonant for you. Seamus.
Finally have space where not everyone is around with their doggos, but I just am thinking and dwelling on the both and of when I set good boundaries, it creates more abundance for the right people. And you know, I'm always looking to nature, and the bramble to me is such a beautiful picture of boundaries that keeps the predators out so that the wee birds and bunnies can have access to the fruit that they need to survive. And that's how I want to be, is like, oh no, here's the thorns if you're gonna mess with stuff, and it's gonna get tangled real quick. But if you can be gentle and careful, if you can respect what's here, there's plenty of nourishment that I have to offer.
Love that. Beautiful imagery. Thanks for sharing that. And can we send you some vibes of support as you tend to your bramble? Always a huge fan of nature metaphors because all we need to know is right there. Any final shares before I let you all go? Yeah, Camille.
Just something brief, but I also like all the nature metaphors. So that was reminding me when I was still in grad school that one image that I was working on was around like just sort of that idea of like being prickly. So for me, it was more around like being like, you know, when it's okay to be like a porcupine. And so I had a image, so just reminding me, I had an image of a porcupine on my like notebook or like sort of my binder that had some of my like internships things. So just appreciate that came up again, and reminder of when it's good to be, when I'm allowed to be prickly or need to be prickly, and that's okay. There's still, you know, doesn't mean that I'm not being supportive for the right people, but sometimes you do need to keep the wrong people away too. And I guess just practicing taking up space. So thank you, everybody.
Hey, thank you, Camille. Can we send you support as you own your porcupine nature when needed? Amanda, it's okay to be a prick. I mean prickly. I love that. And thank you, Camille. B says, plus I got to pet a porcupine once, so works both ways. Oh, that's so cool. I love that. And Camille, thank you for the reminder. Right on my desk, I have this little turtle that one of my practitioners got me in Bali, and she got it for me when I was doing all this really intense boundary work. And she gave it to me to remind me that I can poke my head out and be visible when I want to, and I can go inside my shell and hide if I need to protect myself, and to stay close to myself. And so thanks for that reminder of the animal helpers on our boundaries journey. Awesome.
Very cool. Thank you.
Janice, are you saying goodbye, or you want to raise your hand?
Saying goodbye.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Just appreciating you all so much and enjoying being on this journey with you. I look forward to seeing you all next week for week number 4. And I will right now get to shifting all these or processing the recording so they can go up into the members area, and you'll get an email when that's all up in there. So thank you all so much. This is Starr 2R signing out. Bye, everybody.
Bye.